this next topic we have thought about a little bit before. We've even talked about it a little bit here. It's this idea of just comparing the Rivian R1T versus the Hummer truck, or the R1S versus the Hummer SUV, the EV version of those that are coming out. And we had decided that all of us are a little bit more of like opinion guys rather than news reporters, where we want to line up all these facts and figures. So I thought that we could just go like straight to the jugular here and talk about, from a price value standpoint, about how these two vehicles, and really four, and then there's different trim lines, so to speak, within all those. So there's a lot to cover here to ask you all to give us a bottom line in terms of price comparisons. But can you give it like your first reactions when it comes to, you got a friend that comes up and says, hey, how's that Rivian truck or SUV compare to the new Hummer EV coming out? What do you guys say right away? Top of the head.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
In order for me to get the same bang for my buck, I've got to go a level or two, or even all the way to the bottom rung of the Hummer vehicles, in order to get the price where the Rivian is.
Okay.
And once you go there, and I know I probably said that the long way. Once you go there, you know, you're looking, especially at like the Hummer EV or the SUV, I'm looking at, you know, 2 motors versus 4, lower miles, way lower power, towing rating is fairly comparable. But you definitely end up losing out on some features that I feel the Rivian has that the Hummer does not.
Okay. So to restate that, to get the price down to where the R1T is in your case, you have to get the entry level, and you get a lot of performance.
Right. And even, and not even on top of performance, timeline.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those
those
the base model Hummers, you know, you're looking at spring of 20 or summer of 23, or actually it's right there in front of me, spring of 24, excuse me.
Yeah.
Spring of 24 for you to get that Hummer EV2 SUV.
So how much more money do you have to tack on to the Hummer in order to kind of get the similar performance that you're getting with your own vehicle right now through Rivian? Is it like 30 grand about?
30 grand.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. 20 to 30. And where Jimmy, you know, kind of said, hey, if I can get the price down to the Rivian, I looked at it through a little bit different lens, and it's like, okay, what would I have to spend on a Hummer to get close to Rivian's performance that they can get at, you know, 67.5 or 72.5 or whatever the case is, you know, with the lower end Rivians. And the answer is, yeah, you have to spend 100 grand on a Hummer. And the Hummer truck is a little bit more expensive than the Hummer SUV. And just other general impressions and opinions. One of the big things for me is Rivian's 4 independent motors. And even the top of the line Hummers come with 3. The Hummers are bigger and heavier. And, you know, from an aesthetic standpoint, I think the Rivians are better looking vehicles. And I mean, to give Hummer props in a couple different areas, I do think that the 4-wheel steering is cool. I think, you know, practical application for that in turning radius is cool, but the crab walk, I think is a gimmick. But the other thing that I think is very impressive with the Hummers is the UI. And they built that UI using Unreal Engine, which, you know, is kind of the heart of a lot of video games.
Right.
So very cool, very realistic. They're trail maps function is very, very cool. But, for me, for Skylar, just trying to look at it objectively, bang for the buck, far and away goes to Rivian.
Mm-hmm. Great points. You were kind of mentioning the bang for the buck for like performance as far as 4 motors. Is there anything else as far as that we can highlight for the audience? I mean, horses and torque, all that kind of stuff is going to be comparable, but only when we're spending 30 grand more to get there.
Right.
GMC, and then same thing, of course, just with quickness. You got a huge vehicle as well. As far as the battery architecture, I think it's 800 volt instead of 400. So you start getting into all the stuff about charging and ownership experience. Now we've gotten into whole other areas about which one you want to choose, because it's not necessarily only about the vehicle, but about what's behind it. And of course, GM has a lot of history, but it's kind of like this new frontier as far as charging networks and over-the-air software updates and autonomous driving. And you start talking about all of those topics, and it's like, who's got the lead there, and how much is all that going to come into play for the everyday drive? So that's all something to think about too when you're going to compare these two vehicles. It's no longer just about horses or torque.
Yeah, no, that's true. And actually the charging is an interesting topic, because what the Hummer EVs are doing is actually taking a 400 volt architecture and allowing 800 volt charging, which is what Rivian has a patent for. And we just don't know whether that's going to be implemented in at least the first generation of vehicles. So that could be a wash. And matter of fact, pretty much, very, very similar between the two.
Yep.
Right. And using my comparison, having to go all the way down to the Hummer EV2 in order to make the price comparable, that vehicle is a 400 volt charging. There is an 800 volt option, but that is an option that you would obviously have to pay extra for, and that price is undisclosed at this moment.
So, yeah, that's right, Jimmy. I mean, you've got to step up at least a step or two in the model range just to get the 800 volt charging, right?
Right. Yep. Oh, yeah. One step to the EV2X to be able to get some of that stuff. Yep.
Beyond performance, then, I know, Skylar, you kind of already just mentioned, at the end of the day, buying a car is a personal decision. People just don't buy for specs. They buy for looks, and that's largely subjective. You've already said that you like the looks of the R1S much more. I would agree. And then even just the practicality of the size of the R1S, I love, because it still seats 7, but it's, I can still, park it in a normal size. I mean, I was at baseball games tonight, and these ball fields give you this much room to park in, so it's everyday stuff like that I largely prefer. I mean, to kind of end with anything else subjective, do we want to kind of just mention anything as far as we're concerned of why we love and why we're putting our dollars behind the Rivian brand instead of the Hummer, or any other brand, or anything else that you want to tease out there as far as just subjectively speaking, or maybe who the Hummer is for, anything like that?
I think for me, just the look of the Rivian. I mean, yes, it's a very familiar shape, a very familiar design in a truck and an SUV, but then you look at some of the details in the front end, obviously being the biggest, that the stadium lights and that super long horizontal DRL. Those little things mixed with just some of the other capabilities and the other feature sets, with the gear tunnel for me in the truck and some of the storage options that you guys have in the R1S. It just, to me, it just screams a win over the Hummer, at least for me personally.
I know I've mentioned many times that the interior of the Hummer, or of the R1T and or S, just as far as in the driver's section, is so much cleaner and simpler and draws my eye out so much more like this, so much more than something like this, which is just like center of a cockpit, give me a lot of buttons, and I just largely personally prefer this. And I'm not knocking anyone that, likes this one better, but I would agree there. Skylar, you're going to say something?
Yeah, so I was going to make a couple of points. So number one, a big deal with me in the Rivian SUV is 3 rows.
Yes.
The Hummer EV SUV does not have a 3rd row option.
So
the even more interesting thing about that is the 2 vehicles are about the same length. So, I mean, where is the rest of the room in the Hummer going? I don't know. Could be just poor use of space. But then from an overall kind of company and brand perspective, I really do believe in Rivian's mission and culture much more than General Motors. And so that's an influencing factor for me. But I mean, really at the end of the day, it boils down to bang for the buck and overall value.
Yep. And us 3 might be a little bit atypical to where I think we all kind of 3 root for the startup, and we like the story of the startup, and not everyone's like that, but I certainly do, especially a startup here in the States, So I love that. That's American made, and I mean, not that GM's not, but you know what I mean? I like the story of the startup because it's obviously such a difficult one to win, and they're so close. So really rooting for them. Want to be a part of it, so to speak. Yep.
We are a part of it.
That's right. Even though we can't, never mind. Sell t-shirts. Thanks for watching. If you get a chance, please check us out at rivianstories.com. And every like, subscribe, and share helps. Thanks again.